Good afternoon. This is a Devar Torah on Parshas Thetze. It covers a wide range of subjects. It begins with the mitzvah, the command on captive woman captive in war. Um, from there, it goes on to the mitzvahs of the firstborn son share, where man has two wives. Polygamy used to be permitted, was permitted. Um, and what happens here is um, if the firstborn of the disliked wife is firstborn, she has to get the double share. The firstborn, even though has a more beloved wife who also provides with the firstborn son, and is younger than the hated wives. And we talk about the Venezuela more rebellious son, and when the person is death by hanging, the body cannot remain. It's that they must be buried. Even a criminal has that much respect. Um, it also discusses returning lost articles. If your brother's donkey or ox falls under the burden, you have to help him, even if he's an enemy. No male garment shall be on a woman. No man shall wear a woman's garment. Whoever does these such practices revolting to Hashem, your God. Another famous one, if you come across a bird's nest and it contains baby birds or eggs, the mother is sitting on them. You must not take the mother along with you, and you must first chase her away. If you do, you'll have it good and will live long. Again, worthy of discussion itself. When you build a new house, you must place a guardrail around it so people going up to the roof won't fall. It also talks about sharpness, mixed agriculture, and it goes on to discuss other forbidden combinations of clothes, plowing with the donkey and ox together because it's not fair to the donkey. If somebody accuses his wife that she was not still on the wedding night, if the parents bring forth evidence that she was, um, he will be punished. If not, she will be punished. And the mitzvahs of goes all the laws of for married women and a man or together. There's all different circumstances, and it also talks what happened to unmarried, unengaged girl. It's also talking about various people that can be converted and which ones can't. And then talks for maintenance of cleanliness in respect to the army camp. Um, you do not have obligation not to return slaves. There's also prohibitions against um, being a harlot or the male equivalent. You cannot charge interest from your brother, being the Jews. You must keep your vows. And then talks about divorce and remarriage, flags in the millstone, Saras. And if your friends, one who's lending out money to, he's using his code as security. You cannot take it from him. Go into his house and embarrass him. And testimony of close relatives is not allowed. And then goes into many other showing cruel kindness, various types agriculturally, and upon the penalty of a malchus flogging in certain offenses. And if a brother if a man dies childless, his widow is supposed to marry the brother so that the baby can be produced from that. Um, and then ends that you shall keep on his weights. It's the merchant. And finally, it talks about remembering Amalek, remember what he has to do, and that he must be stamped out from under the heavens. Now, that is quite a very list of things. What I'm going to speak about is the very first thing in the Parsha. Yitetzim l'chama olavecha, natan alhecha biyadecha, shivat shaliv. When you wage a war against your enemies, God will give you victory over them, so you will take captains. Now, this is the difficult part. Ri'iti b'shivaya, Ashes yafat toar, zhichakat ba, l'kakat la le'isha. Among prison desire, you may take her as a wife. And it then goes on to say you have to have such obligations. You must bring her home, shave off her head, in other words, her hair, let her fingernails grow. She must take off her captive's garb, remain in your house for a full month, mourning father and mother. Only then may you be with her, making you wife. If you do not desire, you will send away. Since you have had your way with her, you may not sell her or keep cash as a servant. Now, on the surface level, Rashi explains it as a concession to men that even a man, even a very elevated man, and soldiers in those days were, can still have a Yetzer Hara, and to regulate that, there's strict rules of how it has to work, whether he can only be with on the battlefield and then afterwards or only afterwards. That's a whole separate discussion. Now, having said that, there's a number of questions that are raised. First of all, the army in those, first of all, which war are we talking about? Before I get to the more remez, allusions, looking literally on the surface, it's not talking about a war against the seven Canaanite nations when we're talking what became Eretz Israel. It cannot mean that, because there every captive must be man, woman, child, must be killed so that they won't ensnare us and they won't ensnare us in idol worshiping. So we're talking about wars of reshut, not ones commanded by God, but if you to be on the territory of Eretz Canaan. Now, in that case, that's what we're talking about on the level. And as I said, Rashi says the concessions man's Yetzer Hara. Now, I'd like to look at, and then it says if you marry such a woman, they will produce, they should become a hated wife, because she'll probably sin in any event. And that's when they talk about the hated wife who's first has to get for double rights, firstborn. And then it says these wives can produce then sort of a more rebellious son. Now, that's again on a Parashat level. Now, there's a number of questions. If all of these people, and their soldiers, were Talmidei Chachamim, why would they be pursuing such a woman who was an idol worshiper, and she was beautiful, and she was trying, in some cases, to distract the men and try to tempt them? We saw how that resulted in the time. It's in Baal Peor when 4,000 Jews died for idol worship, which I've discussed in a previous Parsha, Parshas Balak. Now, I would like to give some deeper explanations of what this means. I'm going to be basing myself on Likutei Torah and Likutim, and the question is asked. There's a question. If you say it's to stop him from servicing against the Yetzer Hara, the Likutei Torah says, well, that could apply to any mitzvah. That's one question. Second of question, it's going to say later that Hashem returned us as his captives to Mitzrayim for the sins we committed, but nobody would buy us. When the Romans captured us, the Jewish slaves were such a in the market that not everybody wanted them. And why was that such a punishment? And Likutei Torah asks, because why? And Hashem doesn't say it about any other exiles. Why the Egyptian exiles? And finally, there's the Gilead. He explains Egypt was a greater exile than the first four, than the last four, which were Babel, Media, Parsa, Media, Persia, Media, Greece, and Edom. Why was it so great? Why were we there so long? Why is it the worst exile? Because that was the top exile. We had more work to do. Now, he then goes on to explain that each one of the letters in the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the name with which Hashem created the world, universe. The Yud represents Bavel, Babylonia. The first A represents Persia Mede. The third one represents Yavan, Greece, and the fourth one represents Achaemenid of Rome. So what's above that is Egypt, because that's the top. The Tziner is written Sefer Torah. The letter has a little thing going up on the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. And what's it telling us? That was above all exiles. And why were we in Egypt so long? Because we were there the longest, and it shows that Hashem's mastery of the universe is based on that. And these four exiles, not Egypt, but the other four exiles, are represented to different parts of the body. This is based on the statue of Daniel in Sefer Daniel, chapter 2, and a famous statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream that had the Rosh represents Bavel. Media prosper is against the shoulders, torso. And Yavan is connected to Goof, that's one of them, that's how we know. And the Mishmal, they're connected to two thighs, and they're long. In fact, they go to the feet, the Kuva, and we're in that era now. That represents a Kuva's Mashiach, the footsteps of Mashiach, the hills of Mashiach, which I've spoken about previously. And David Melech, the Mashiach ben David, cannot come until all the neshimas that were in the body was the body of Adam. And many of those neshimas, the souls at the time, went into the klipot, spiritual impurities, and our job is to redeem them. And with that long introduction, Egypt, we had to do the most. And because there was so much impurity, so many in the souls given there. However, Shem helped us redeem all the souls between the Jewish people and the Shem partnership. We redeemed all of those souls, so we didn't have to come back there again. We also have to do in four exiles, since we didn't. First temple, we eventually are exiled from the first and second temples. And we had to go through that process of our mitzvahs and Torah and our suffering to bring the sparks out. And why did we have to not go back to Egypt? Because we broke all of it. It was empty for us. So that was why there was a greater punishment. It talks about capture, the same word it uses with the captive woman. And it's teaching us a very important lesson here, that this woman is actually a high neshama in the klipot she's been trapped in. I've been trapped in there. And if she's truly righteous and is one of those holy sparks, by marrying her, he will pull that spark out and bring her up to the level she is supposed to be. That is one explanation. And just like we did it there, since they used the word captured in both places, it shows the connection, and that is one understanding. Now, another understanding brought in the Likutei Torah, in the Likutei, excuse me, it also elaborates that it's talking about the four exiles, and he answers the question, well, why would a Talmid Chacham? Because a Talmid Chacham is perfecting himself, fighting against the Yetzer Hara. It's also in Tamei Mitzvahs. Is perfecting himself, fighting the Yetzer Hara. And as a tzaddik moves, and all these soldiers tzaddikim move higher and higher, they can reach the level where they realize that these pure sparks that represent holy neshimas will be perfected and need to be rescued. So again, we have the same theme. So that explains why we're fighting our Yetzer Hara, in this case, the captive woman, but all Yetzer Haras. And that's how we can get to the level where we can detect that. Now, I'd like to look at that process of the exiled woman a little more, captive woman. And this is based on the commentary of Shimshon Astropoli. in his Sefer, and actually his commentary, Dan Yadin, for the Sefer Karnaim, discusses this at length. And I would like to summarize some of what was said. It's not talking about war in the ordinary sense. And this has already been partially explained. Rosh Hashanah was a Makubal, a great Rabbi Makubal in Ukraine. He died al Kiddush Hashem with 3 other 100 Hamadei Kakamim, wiped out, and the Kameniki uprising by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians let the people in the uprising in, and he wrote a whole explanation of one of the works of the commentaries of the Arizal on something in Haggadah. In fact, he was at such a level that anybody who reads that, and it's usually done Arab Pesach, but it can be done any time, all of his enemies will be defeated. Everybody who learned this writing of Shimshon Mastropoli in Hungary in 1944, even though they suffered challenges, not one of them died at the hands of the Nazis between 44 and the end of the war. Now he explains, when he says you see among the captives a woman of beautiful form, it's referring again and reinforcing partially what was said to a higher and holy soul, a divine spark. That's been with the Klipo, as I explained. Now, what enemies are we talking about the war? Enemies, he explains. Again, the Battle of Asadik, or any individual faced against the Yetzer Hara and forces of evil that may face him. And he'll discover these sparks. And they'll bring him out into holiness. Now, I want to go, that is a further confirmation and elaboration what I've already said, but it goes a little further. It says shaving the head and trimming the nails. On the level of illusion, what is that talking about? It's talking about the Kliba Noga, the impure forces, and teaches that hair and nails represent extensions to the body where judgment and strong din manifest. And what is that equal to? That is talking about, on a deeper level, the klipot, the spiritual impurities that are holding that neshama captive, that soul captive. So what happens when they cut the nails, shave their head and remove the nails? The person is systematically, it's dispel the shell of impurity around her, covers the holy spark, then neshama can come out through the neshama. And shall remove the garment of her captivity. What is that talking about? And Rav Shimshon Mastropoli quotes Zechariah, and it talks says, remove the filthy garments from. What's that talking about? Rav Shimshon Mastropoli. When the soul descends into the lower world or sins, it's wrapped in filthy garments created by the other forces of impurity. So what it's doing is removing these negative garments so the soul can be reclothed in the wonderful garments of Torah and mitzvahs. Now, who's the father and mother she's weeping for? It's not the earthly mother and father. It's the mother and father, the spiritual concepts, Chachma, which means wisdom, Father, 1 of 10 spheres, and Bina, from which the soul was severed when it fell into captivity. Tshuva will bridge the gap and get that spark back. Now, that, as you can see, connects to Elul, because he's showing, it says, that Yerakimim, month of days, is Mlushon, month of Elul. So we can follow that too. And by looking, evaluating ourselves, looking at all the strong and good points, and then also removing the barriers between us and Hashem. And much of the stuff in the Parsha is, in fact, dealing with blockages and how to show chesed. And I would like to give us, every one of us, that we should use this month of Elul well, removes those outer barriers, and have our neshamas truly come back to Hashem. So we individually and the whole Klal Israel should be blessed with a wonderful new year, and may it be the year of the ultimate redemption. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.